Hi, my name is Rocío Almanza. I'm a digital producer at Fred Rogers Productions. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And for folks who may be in listening mode only, I'm a light brown woman wearing a white shirt. I have long brown hair, and I'm wearing also golden earrings.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon. I'm also a digital producer at Fred Rogers Productions. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a white woman with dark hair wearing glasses and a blue and white striped dress.
So quick housekeeping reminder that through the YouTube live stream of this event, you should be able to get closed captions if you need them. So let's get started. So first, I would like to take a moment to say that we are aware of the several layers of the topic of inclusion in children's media. And by no means we attempt to fully develop this topic in a 20-minute session. So rather, we would like you to have a few takeaways to put your gears in motion. Also, we are not experts in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but practitioners sharing our experiences producing games for kids. If you're serious about it, we encourage you to reach out to the many practitioners with ample experiences to grow your efforts and create meaningful change in your practices. And then, on a second note, so in this session, we will be talking about producing games as part of an organization. We think this is an important distinction. So not as independent creators or developers. So we think that it's important to make this distinction because the parts of the system are different. Also because we firmly believe that the mission and values of an organization are key to implement the necessary changes to be more inclusive. So the values that guide how we produce game at Fred Rogers are respect, thoughtfulness, differences, and crafts. So these really are key to create games that include and don't exclude. So how we do this? So there's this famous quote that says, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. So I recently attended a session by an organization called Vibrant, and the instructor used the same quote, but added that to them, inclusion is being part of the planning committee. And I really like that. That really resonated with the work that we do at Fred Rogers. And that's why in this image that you see right now on screen, we have children in that circle in the center. Because for us, children are always first. And then we have a few key components that are part of the system that we work around. So we ask ourselves questions like, who is our audience? And by that, obviously, we mean kids. Who are they? What are the specific characteristics that are going to help us to develop the games? Then how do we reach them? How can we best serve them? And then who are we as people and who are our partners? All of these impact how we implement things and how we create the content within our audience. So as we go along in the presentation, we're going to go deeper into each of these points. So I'm going to tell a quick story. When I started working on the production of the digital content for a new show called Almas Way, about a Puerto Rican girl and her family living in the Bronx, I needed a framework that could work well with the theme and the goals of the show. This is about critical thinking. So that's where the equity design framework became pertinent. This is geared more towards designers, but it has really helped me as a producer. So as you can see, there are two in the image that we have here. We have all the phases of the human-centered design process, and we have two additional phases. And those phases are notice and reflect. And this is really about pausing to ask questions, even philosophical questions, especially about identity, because ultimately people are the ones creating the games. We are the ones creating games. So we really need to think about what the influence of who we are has in the games and ultimately how we reach kids. So in my case, and that's the part of the example of the story, I have to acknowledge that I'm my identity as a Latina, but also knowing that I can't represent all Latinos and that my experiences are different from our audience and a family like Almas, that's the main character, that is a Puerto Rican family living in the Bronx. So again, this is truly about pausing and reflecting throughout, especially in the game design document. So to give you an example, in a resource game we're working on, in the original description, there was a phrase that said, the goal of the game is for the Rivera's Almas family, the main character, to serve the needs of the people at the party. So this is where we have to do that pause and that reflection and say, is this a charge phrase? And I thought about this because, historically, we Latinos are, are supposed to serve the needs of people or be at the service of people. So you really have to pause and think, am I transmitting this idea in my games? Even if we don't intend to do so, we have to pause and think about it. And actually, I'm pretty sure this seems like a minor detail that won't be even visible in the game because it's in the design document. It's not that we're going to put something explicit in there. But I think it's still important because, as we know, each of these things contribute to maintain certain stereotypes. And also with these, we truly want to honor and amplify the great care that the producers of the show put. And this, we are going to do this through the digital content and especially the games that we produce. And now Shannon will share more of what we do to serve kids and their families.
Great. Hi, everyone. So as Rocío just touched on, as digital producers at Fred Rogers Productions, she and I have the pleasure of making games and other digital content for children based on the shows that our colleagues produce. So if you have young children or work with young children, you might recognize some of these characters from our shows. So from the left, there's Daniel Tiger, Peg Plus Cat, Odd Squad, Donkey Hodie, and the upcoming Almas Way, which Rocío was just talking about, which will be premiering on PBS KIDS this fall. So each show has a specific curriculum, such as social emotional learning or math, and a target age range. So starting with 2 years old for Daniel Tiger, up to 8 for Odd Squad. And we make games based on the learning goals for each show and for the particular target age. So within our audience of 2 to 8-year-olds, there's a wide range of cognitive, developmental, and physical skills. And we strive to make our games as inclusive and accessible as possible so that all children who would like to engage with our characters and with our games can do so. So where do we reach our audience? That's an important question. We produce our games for PBS KIDS. So children find and play our games on both the PBS KIDS website and in the PBS KIDS Games app. So this means our games need to be playable on a wide range of devices, including desktop, laptop, tablets, and phones. We also need to support devices and operating systems going back several years. We don't expect kids to have the latest and greatest device or to be constantly updating their operating system. So this, of course, has production implications for our games. We try to keep the file size as small as possible to ensure the games can load quickly and play smoothly on older devices or if kids aren't connected to Wi-Fi, which means being mindful of things like how much animation and voiceover we're including in our games. We also consider the environment where kids are playing. So they might be at home, in the car, on the bus, or at school. It might be noisy or quiet where they are, or they might be somewhere where they need to be quiet and they need to play the game with the sound turned off. So all these factors have implications for how kids will experience our games and how we design them as well. And just to note that we play test every game that we make with our target audience a few times. So this is not only helpful, of course, in identifying usability issues and getting feedback directly from kids, but also getting a glimpse at what devices kids are using. It's always a little bit of a surprise. Okay, so how can we best serve our audience? In an effort to make our games as inclusive as possible, we consider and incorporate best practices in accessible design and universal design for learning. So things like color contrast, closed captions, supporting inputs for both touch and keyboard. The list you see here on the right is by no means exhaustive, but see, these are some of the things that we consider and that we try to incorporate into our games. So for the rest of the presentation, Rocío and I will be sharing some examples of how we do this. Just a note before we move on. So the Universal Design for Learning guidelines were developed by an organization called CAST, that's C-A-S-T. We recommend going to their website where they provide lots of useful resources and more in-depth information than we'll be able to cover in today's presentation. Okay, so I will start with some examples from Daniel Tiger, which is a show we produce that is designed for 2 to 4-year-olds with a social emotional curriculum. So what we're looking at here is the games page on the Daniel Tiger website, which we redesigned last year with a focus on accessibility. So some features you might notice include color contrast. So you can see the navigation buttons at the top change color to communicate which page the user is on. So you can see we're on the games page as that button is white with an orange outline while the others are yellow. We also use very large buttons. So the navigation buttons and the game promos are all pretty large. They have plenty of space between them to make it less likely that a young child will accidentally click on a nearby button. We emphasize images over text. So our target audience for Daniel Tiger is 2 to 4. They most likely are not reading yet. So we need to make sure that the images themselves are communicating clearly what the content is. And then limited options. So there are over 20 games on the Daniel Tiger website, but we wanted to offer a manageable number of choices at one time so that we don't overwhelm kids. So we display a handful at a time with the arrow to see more. Okay, and this is the title screen for a Daniel Tiger game. So what I wanted to point out here are the controls that we offer kids, which are the orange buttons you see at the top of the game frame. So from left to right, we offer a full screen button. So this allows kids to fill the screen with the game, making everything nice and big and easy to navigate. Closed captions, which kids can turn on and off. Sound, which kids have control to turn on and off. And then the close button, which we deliberately made red, a different color than the game controls so that kids don't accidentally click it and exit the game. Okay. So this is just a quick example of how we implement closed captions in our games. So although for Daniel Tiger in particular, our target audience is very young and most likely can't read, we do provide captions in all of our games in the case that perhaps older kids are playing the games, or parents and caregivers might be playing along and they might want or need access to the captions. So just a few features to point out is that we include the character name when there are multiple characters on screen. So in this case, Daniel's the one speaking. In this particular example, he's actually singing, so we note that and include a music symbol. And in terms of placement, we typically place captions at the top of the game, but they could just as easily go at the bottom. The key is just not to cover up any important UI. Okay, and this is a screenshot from a Daniel Tiger game called Dance Party. So in this game, kids choose one character at a time to lead them through a dance. And the goal of the game is for kids to actually get up and physically move along with the characters to dance along. So our games typically only include Daniel Tiger or Daniel and a couple other characters, and that goes back to file size concerns. But for a game encouraging physical movement, we felt it was really important to include several characters with a range of abilities. So in particular, we wanted to include our character Chrissy, who you see on the right, and she uses braces to help her walk. So we worked with our advisors to make sure the dance moves that Chrissy does are well within her abilities. And anecdotally, when we were playtesting this game, we saw a number of children select Chrissy as the first character that they wanted to play with. So lots of appeal, and I'm really glad we were able to make sure that we included a number of characters and a range of abilities here. Okay, so now I'll switch over to a few examples from Hodie, which is a puppet show we produce for kids 3 to 5. With a curriculum focused on persistence, resilience, and problem solving. So this is a screenshot from our game called Dontkeys Froyo Stand, where kids go through a series of steps to make frozen yogurt ordered by the characters. And the features I wanted to highlight here are related to how we help kids focus on the step at hand. So we communicate this in multiple ways, visually, through sound effects, and through voiceover. So visually, you can see the ticket on the left. The first step is grayed out to indicate that this step was already done. The current step, which is the yogurt flavor, is highlighted with a blue circle. So that animates in once we get to this step. And that animation is also accompanied by a sound effect to draw attention to it. And then finally, if kids tap on the ticket, there's voiceover telling them what comes next in the order. So in this case, the vanilla yogurt. And we added this feature after playtesting where we saw multiple kids tapping on the ticket when they were looking to try to figure out what to do next. And this is from the same game, just when the order is delivered to the customer. And again, just wanted to point out the multiple ways that we're communicating a wrong answer. So visually, you can see on the ticket, the correct parts of the order have a blue circle and a green check mark. And then the wrong part of the order, the toppings down at the bottom, has a red circle around it. As the circles and check marks animate, there's a sound effect associated with it, indicating a right or wrong answer. And then the character receiving the order also has voiceover telling the player that the order isn't quite right and asking them to try again. So of course, playing the game with the audio on is definitely the richest experience, but the game is still very clear and playable if the sound isn't available for whatever reason. And then finally, these are screenshots from a Donkey Hodie game currently in the works called Purple Pandas Spaceball. So in this game, kids are using various controls like turning the wheel or pushing the button to fly Panda's spaceship. We wanted the inputs for this game to really feel like you were flying the ship. So rather than just clicking all the controls in the same way, you have to turn the wheel or pull down a lever. And while these inputs were pretty intuitive for kids on touchscreen, they're pretty difficult for kids playing on a desktop or a laptop to do with a mouse or trackpad. So we knew we needed to offer keyboard controls as well. So I just wanted to share a little bit of like the evolution of our controls so far. So on the left, you can see our initial idea, which is for kids to find particular letter keys associated with each control. We thought this might be a fun challenge for kids, but realized in testing that it actually made the game more inaccessible, which was the complete opposite, of course, of what we were trying to do, since we were asking kids to switch between looking up at the game and then looking down at the keyboard and finding the right key. So on the right, you can see our current design, which we're still testing, but we're now using the arrow keys, which are certainly more familiar for kids. And the keys are all grouped together on the keyboard, making them easier to locate. Hopefully that will work out well. It certainly seems to be working better than our first option. And that is it for Daniel Tiger and Donkey Hodie. So I will pass it back to Rocío.
Thank you. So as Shannon and I mentioned before, we're in the process of developing digital content for Almas Way. The show launches in October. Feel free to put it in your calendars if you want. And what is interesting in here, what I'm showing here is just prototype of the homepage. And so from the start, we plan to have all the content in English and Spanish. So this was not an afterthought. And that also allows us to choose the right partners for this project, someone that could deliver on that promise. So as some of us with experience designing bilingual content know, there are specific considerations and challenges when designing content in 2 languages. There are also amazing rewards, one of them being the certainty, or at least the expectation, that these will promote intergenerational play that we know is so important. And for the same show for Alma, we're currently developing a game where kids have to bop a balloon back and forth, like you're seeing. And in several testing sessions, we saw kids in the target group, so kids 4 to 6, struggling with drag and stick actions. Not all of them, but we know that the motor skills of some kids are more developed than others. So these really motivated us to find a different approach. So in this case, it was tapping. So what you're seeing is the first prototype where we didn't get it yet. That caused a little bit of frustration among kids. And the play testing sessions also motivated us to challenge our team to use as little sound as possible. And we think that doing so is going to benefit a lot of kids. Yeah, so we hope these examples and our methods are helpful for you. There is certainly more work to do, and this brings opportunity for folks and studios interested in this field. So for us, some of those opportunities are, so we want to expand the pool of game developers we work with. We also want to expand the population of children we play test with, and also the pool of advisors and organizations that help us further our mission. So if you're interested, we're going to give you our email address in a few seconds. But I think the big takeaway we want you to have from these 20 minutes is that when you are creating, producing, developing your games, to think, who are you including? And who are you excluding with each decision? And yes, this requires more time, but we think it's worth it. You also think, who are you leaving out? Going back to the metaphor, who is planning the party? Who is invited? Who's dancing? But also, who is enjoying the party? And finally, like the characters in some of our shows would say, take time to pause, think, and figure things out.
All right, so thank you all for joining us today. We hope we shared some things that were interesting and applicable to your own work. If you're interested in continuing a conversation with us, we'd be happy to hear from you. So this is our email address, digital@fredrogers.org. And we also will right now be moving to a Q&A portion in the Imagine Q&A room. So feel free to join us there if you have any questions for us. And that link should be in the chat. And hopefully we'll see some of you there. Thank you all.
Thank you.